So to start off the conversation about sharing mentoring experiences with graduate students. And then we'll later talk more about graduate students as mentors. Okay, so I guess what's important to bring up here for this workshop is more or less from your perspective, the grad student perspective of the interaction with the graduate advisor. Yeah. So I think what's important is to realize that every relationship is unique between a mentor and a mentee. There's no one-size-fits-all formula for it to work, and that's because people are unique. But the responsibility in mentoring is two ways. The advisor has a lot of experience in knowing where you need to go to finish successfully, not just the program, but career-wise and professionally, and what are the things you need. And often it's very overwhelming to explain all of the steps and details, and easier to let the student focus on the next hurdle. So I guess the advisor's job is like a sports coach, right? To get you to the Olympic competition without overwhelming you with all the things you have to do to get there. The other important thing, I think, is that you need to learn how to get the most out of your relationship with your advisor. And you need to think about your advisor both as a mentor, but also as your boss. And it's practice for what happens when you have another boss in the real world, but the relationship is different and the consequences are different. So if you go to industry, you have metrics and things that happen. You may get moved, your talents may get reshifted somewhere because of the company needs and things like that. So one important thing to learn is, what are the expectations? Why are the expectations what they are? And how do we do this interaction between what your wants or opinions or desires are and why they may conflict with the graduate advisor. So if you think, for example, an experiment needs to be done in a different order, you need to learn how to approach that subject with your advisor, because in the future it'll be with your boss. So I still have 5 minutes, right? Because I could talk for an hour. Okay, so lesson is, 1, it's unique. 2, it's preparing you for your future, not just for your graduation. 3, it's a two-way street. You have to know how to ask for what you want in a good way so that you're prepared when you finish. And I guess the other thing is, your education is definitely an idealistic thing, right? So really you want to learn about things that interest you. But from a practical sense, there are areas that are timely, that are competitive, that are going to be the next generation of advances that are going to prepare you for something. If you think about it, maybe 15 years ago, wireless communications sounded crazy, but it was super important. So you have to think about now things like different approaches to education, different approaches to healthcare, different approaches to materials and materials research. So you kind of have to work outside of the box, but in areas we're betting on. Okay, so that's my 10 minutes. I'll hand the floor over to you.
Okay, so should we clock it? Okay, so yeah, I put together a list of bullet points here, and I think a lot of them are consistent with what Lisa just talked about. So the first one is in terms of the relationship with your advisor as well. So the first thing that I would say is for you to listen to your mentor, right? It seems obvious, but a lot of the students don't listen, right? So try to listen to your mentor and build a constructive relationship, respectful relationship. Right? And that doesn't mean you should not discuss or argue, right? And of course not arguing in a way of more of a discussion, right? But you should be discussing all, like Lisa mentioned about the experiments, right? You have to know how to approach if you're changing some approach, because a lot of the times, right? Of course you need to do critical thinking, but also to evaluate, you should not just accept what you got, right? If you got a list of protocol or a list of either experiments or simulations that you're going to do in my case, case here, and I work with computations, right? You need to critically think about what has been outlined, right? And then discuss that. If you find that there's some issue there with the approach, right? My suggestion would be that you actually propose something different, but show to your advisor, your supervisor, that that's the way you work, because your supervisor is not going to believe you until you actually show it, right? So I would say do the critical thinking, right? Don't just agree with everything that is posed there. In terms of a plan, I would say when you meet with your mentor, one suggestion that I have is that have an agenda. Right, so be organized, put together a bottom line. So all of us are busy, all the professors are busy, and they're not interested in just hearing a lot of I read this, I did that, I did this, right? They're interested in actually knowing what have you accomplished when you meet, right? If you have an hour meeting, or if your advisor stops by your office, or things like that. So have an agenda and be clear with the plans that you have. For the master students, it's a little bit easier because you do have a kind of a clear goal. So you can set, more or less, I usually tell the students to divide in subtasks, right? Because then at least you have a daily goals or weekly goals. For the PhD students, it's a little bit more difficult, especially as you advance, because the idea is that you will know more than your advisor at some point, right? Or you should know about your topic, at least when you get to the third, fourth, or fifth year, right? Hopefully getting closer to graduate when you get to that point. And there is also a philosophical aspect, right, in the PhD, as the name of the degree suggests, and not only in the human sciences, right, but also we have several people here from Eberly College and from engineering, that you do need to develop new theory, right, and so you need to go and do a lot of critical thinking there, and if you're really suitable for the PhD, right, you have to go to that next step, so you need to have a breakthrough, and for that it's not easy. Right? So you will need to do 2, 3, 4 years of that, and again, the idea, since you need a long-term plan, you could break that down into small tasks that are attainable in a short term, right? Otherwise, you're going to get lost, right? So that's kind of another point there. The other point that I have here, and I kind of talked about this constructive environment, but in terms of being honest and fair, I think that's the thing that always works, and I'll talk about this for the mentor when you're actually a mentor as well to the undergraduate students. What I've been finding out, right? I'm not no longer a new faculty, right? I'm going up for tenure. But what I've been finding out is more honest I am with the students, the better. So it actually goes up their concept and goes up the teaching evaluations, and I just get more strict, more honest, but also fair. So if they see that I'm actually fair, I just tell them the truth. Nowadays, it's getting, since I see that it works, I kept telling them, and I think this is also good advice that I'll mention later on, right? So be honest with your faculty mentor, right? And of course, you have to gauge the relationship there, right? Depending on the personality, right, of your advisor. But really try to be honest as much as possible there. If you see that something doesn't work, just tell your advisor. Try to build that relationship. It's not a threat, right? If it's not working, you're afraid of telling your advisor. Just be honest and also fair, and we'll do the same, right? The professors also do the same with you, and that's not only for the teaching, but also for the advising, like the PhD or master's graduate students, right? And I think that's pretty much it. I think I'm getting up to my time as well, but yeah, so I think just to summarize, right, try to build this constructive environment, right? Listen to your advisor there, right? Do some critical thinking, of course, and really be honest with your mentor there in terms of building the relationship. And I'll pass it to Dan.
Thank you. Well, I think you've gotten some great thoughts from Lisa and Fernando. What I'm going to do is to give you this sort of my expectations about mentees, and I'm going to give you 3 general principles and then 3 tips. And the general principles for me, and what I'm hoping to see in a mentee that I'm working with, is enthusiasm, organization, and dedication to the field and the teaching and learning process. Think about enthusiasm, particularly, as we move along in our careers. We've been doing, engineering or chemistry or psychology for a long time, you all bring in new ideas, and that's exciting. And people who are educators are looking for you to be exciting and interesting, to have an interest and to bring some of that enthusiasm. That truly helps, and I think makes the relationship richer, both for you and for the person who's your mentor. I think your mentor really wants to invest even more when you see that enthusiasm from somebody young in the field. It's part of the reason we're here. I was just noticing the three of us, we're all sitting here with our papers. We're prepared. We've taken notes. Your notes are more organized than mine. But this is, I think, what we're doing is what we want to see from our mentees. I just love it when my mentees come in and they have an agenda written down. And it really just helps, and as the student grows, I'll just say, what's next on the agenda? And it's then student-led, because they know, and I'm thinking about things, and there may be something you haven't thought about, and I'll say, well, this is time of year, you probably need to think about this too. This is a little tip within here. Don't bring out the most important thing with 5 minutes left in the meeting. Mentors are busy. We're trying to serve students, we're trying to teach, we're trying to do research. If there's something you're nervous about with your mentor, not sure if you should bring it up, it's a tough one, don't do it in the last 5 minutes. Bring it up early, because it's really a tough spot that we want to help you, work with you, but my gosh, I got a faculty meeting or something to go to in 6 minutes. So, but that organization really helps, I think, in terms of working with a mentor. And then the other part is dedication, and it's a little bit like enthusiasm, but to have read outside, to come in and say, I read this article this week. That's so exciting for a mentor when you bring in something from outside that I didn't assign or whatever, because my view is mentoring it's mutual, it's teaching and learning. It's not just about me giving you information. You've got new ideas, you're new in the field. I'm really counting on you to bring ideas into this relationship and really want to learn from you as well. To me, that's the most effective mentoring relationship, where you bring in new ideas. And I hope that you have a mentoring relationship where you're valued and your ideas are respected. Okay, so those are the 3 principles: enthusiasm, organization, and dedication. And here are the 3 tips, okay? One is share the success. It's something I try to do with my mentees and really appreciate. I love to introduce them to people at conferences, to point out this great skills, things like that. It really means a lot when a mentee acknowledges, that really helped me, to tell us as mentors what is helpful, if your thesis gets published or dissertation, just that bit of acknowledgement. What we're about is you being successful, but boy, that really helps with mentors to have that bit, and we share the success with one another. The other is leave a legacy. With my mentees, I really hope that they will go out and tell other people, gosh, this was really helpful. I was glad to be part of West Virginia University. Go out there and find other really high qualified students, and students that you think would work well with me. I think we pointed out there's different personality matches, things, and so I think that to seek out somebody who will follow in your footsteps as a mentee will really help. One time one of my students, we were recruiting new graduate students, and she told me after the recruitment period that an applicant had said, what's it like working with Dan? And she said, what I told her was, and this was so helpful to me, that you can have whatever kind of relationship you want, with boundaries, with Dan, that it can be very businesslike or much more friendly. And that helped me understand how students were viewing that relationship and how students needed different kinds of things there. But leave that legacy. The other thing, the final thing I talk about is boundaries. That I think in today's world, we've really got to think about appropriate boundaries between students and professors and mentors and mentees. Truly, the mentoring relationship is a academic, professional one. And I truly want it to be friendly and supportive, but it is not a relationship that is a romantic one or one that is, that there should be any coercion on any part, that it really does need to maintain those appropriate boundaries that we have. And that's I guess my advice is for all of us to respect that and to look for that and to ensure that that happens in our mentoring relationship from both sides, from mentors and from mentees. I think we tend to get very close as colleagues, and some of my very dear professional friends are my former students who are now in the field. But there are those boundaries that we need to maintain. So those are my tips. Share the success and leave a legacy, and also maintain appropriate boundaries. My final thing I think I would say is try to enjoy that relationship. Try to make it positive for you and for your mentor, so that both you and the mentor look forward to having whatever those meetings are. Hopefully there's regular contact, whatever that is, several times a week, once a week, whatever, but I really hope that you can find a mentoring relationship that you find rewarding and even fun.
We're actually ahead of schedule, which is good because this is a panel discussion, and you came because you either want to learn something or you have questions about how you should live your academic life, right, with your faculty advisor or research advisor. Please, we have 10-15 minutes for you to ask questions. These are wonderful role models for us, so please shoot your questions.
I'll break the ice. So as a fourth year student, I'm actually really interested in going into academia and everything, and kind of building my own research program. And so, this is our first experience getting to be a mentee. Do you have any advice for somebody that would like to go that track and maybe learn from, my boss always says, make your own mistakes, don't repeat mine. So is there anything like you started out when you were first trying to build your research program that you think would be important to instill on somebody headed into academic life?
So that's definitely more than a 15-minute question. And again, it's different by field. So from a chemistry, which is, I think the best perspective is, if we're looking at R1, meaning you want to be at a place just like WVU, yes, you want to start thinking about your independent research program. And there's a couple of important things you have to think about too. And we three probably don't mention this to you at all. You pick the worst day in my experiments, and I still enjoy coming to lab and working on those problems. So you have to have a strong passion for what you're doing, because it will be 3 in the morning and you'll wake up in the middle of the night engaged in thought about this problem. So it's got to be meaningful to you. And I tell my students, if you do the calculations for life, knowing what the stock market is, you're going to be working for a while. It's like 60% of your life is going to be during your working period. So your job should not be how you eat and pay your house payment. Your job should be your calling for life. Like whatever you see your purpose for the time that you are alive, it should be intimately in what you do. So if diabetes is what keeps you up at night, if cancer is what drives you crazy, if the environment is your problem, you need to decide that this is what's going to keep me up at 3 in the morning trying to come up with a solution, so my contribution can change something. So first you have to find your passion, and believe it or not, even after 4 years, you may still not know what your passion is, but you do know what you're good at, right? And then finding your passion, you sort of have to work in the story of, is it significant? Is it something that's important enough to society to sustain me doing it? So things like environment, diabetes, advanced manufacturing, improved education, meeting science standards, whatever, those can drive you. So you got to find your passion. That's number one. And then once you find your passion, you have to figure out where's the next major breakthrough going to happen. So for example, in neuroscience, it was actually creating new tools and looking at new theories. And if you mated those two things, you had something that no one else had in the field, and you were always going to have an advantage over people. So you kind of want to look at where your passion is, and how do you think that area needs to change in 20 years? And then you need to go shopping for an opportunity to get a different research experience to give you unique training for this problem that drives you. It's like only 76 simple steps and you can get there. But you can do it. And I'm sure you can add more wisdom to what I say.
I think it is field specific, and I think that's important just because we are different disciplines. Postdoctoral fellowships, talking about moving to independent research, I'm kind of a believer in that. Yeah. I did a 3-year postdoc. I thought it was very, very valuable to me. I was pretty young when I entered college. I was young when I went to graduate school. I was one of those who went all the way through. It's very helpful to me personally and scientifically to have that 3 years. So if you're in a field that does that, I highly recommend it. I think, you know, another thing could be, again, it's specific to fields, but you know, to have mentor experiences with someone other than your primary mentor in addition, you know, that if you want to do a series of experiments with somebody else, if that's possible, or to do something in a slightly different area. As a mentor, I really appreciate it when students share with me what they're doing, you know, that it's not a surprise or don't find about it somebody somewhere else, but particularly if they do it in advance. And, you know, again, I hope you have that mentoring relationship where you talk to a mentor and think, that's a great idea, you should do that, or hey, let me help you make a connection, but also, you know, so you do carve out that section of your work that is yours. And I think with you know, a mentoring relationship that's very positive, you'll find the mentor wanting to do that for you, you know, like get out on your own, you know, and even kind of helping you without being intrusive in the area.
Yeah, I agree with the postdoc. I mean, for engineering is also very important. And I think especially because you go through more things, right? As the PhD student, right, you will have your life, and then you mentor your undergraduate students, but then as a postdoc, you're actually going to mentor PhD students, and you have that freedom of being a postdoc as well, and you do write papers with the students as first author or mid author, right? And we got more publications there. But I think the thing that helped me a lot was the fact that I knew how to deal with a couple of students already that I mentored. I mentored undergrads and I mentored masters and PhD students when I got there, and for the faculty position. And then I felt like I was a lot more prepared. Now, I don't know how it would have been otherwise, but I felt like I already knew what to do there. And I think, yeah, related to the point Lisa made as well. And in terms, for me, it was very helpful I have the expertise and I work with the applied math, right, in chemical engineering. And I was looking for the right problem to solve. So until I found, right, there was lots of offers in a sense of people looking, you should work with pharma, you should work with health, we should work. And then when I finally found energy and sustainability, that's what I thought that was the problem that I could tackle. And then I finally saw that was the passion there, the things that I could contribute. I think that's very important. You have a set of skills that you're very good at, and you can choose, kind of tailor that to the problem, right? The area there, and fit that. And like you both said
research interest, and then I was given some list of faculty members, and then to look at their research areas, and then now the question is, I don't have an idea I don't have too much knowledge in urban planning, and the question now is, give me what you want to research on in your PhD. So how would I go about that?
You want to do rock, paper, scissors?
Go ahead. Do you have an idea?
So, and pick up whatever.
Okay.
I think it's the same thing. You picked an area, right? So why'd you pick it? There must be a reason. And what about that area attracted you? And within that sub-discipline that drove you to apply there, when you look at the faculty, you surely can select people who you can envision that they have experience in areas that also interest you. So I think what you're asking is a combination of what project do I want to tell them I'm interested in, okay, and how do I know I'm interested in it? So the first thing is, are you interested in what they do, period, right? And sort of narrow down, why do they do what they do and what makes it interesting? And what are the unmet needs in their area that also call to you? Because what you don't want is to sign on to a faculty member who does energy and sustainability and say, my passion is the next generation of pharmaceuticals and I want to do it with you. Because that person may or may not be able to dedicate the time to that area. If there's synergy, that's the best. And I think you've heard from all of us, nobody was born with 100% confidence that they knew what their area was. They discovered it along the path, and it changes sometimes every few years. So you just have to go with your gut. You pick this program for a reason. You don't know why, but you're picking faculty who interest you a lot. Look at what they're doing and ask, what is it about them that interests you so much? Talk with them about their research and things that are unanswered questions in their field, and then go from there. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and I think was kind of implicit what you said, the latest thing about talking to them. I would suggest that you visit, right? So visit the place, like if you're really questioning, I'm not sure if it's here or not, right, where you're interested in. If you have the opportunity or if they can sponsor your visit, go talk, because it's very important also your relationship, as I've been describing here. Maybe the area you love, right, you're not gonna like the advisor, for example, or the opposite, right? So you do need to go and make sure a lot of your success is gonna be dependent on that as well, right? So you go and talk to people. It sounds like you're questioning still, right? What area you have some interest in the overall in the area, but not the specifics. So you can kind of shape that. And I totally agree with the goals. Like, they are dynamic. So you can do that for the best of your knowledge today. What you like today, you can list that. That doesn't mean you're going to end up working with that, right? Maybe you're going to end up working with another professor, and you just love it, and right, you get a lot done. So I think those are my tips there.
The only other thing I might add is if I'm just kind of envisioning your process, and may or may not be accurate, but I'd go to the website and find their recent papers, and I would read them and find out if those are interesting to me. And I love the idea about visiting. You know, if you're talking at, like here at this institution, find out when their office hours are and drop by.
Yeah, they will love that.
See if they're receptive, see if there's a good personality match, if they're welcoming, and I think it's fine to say, you know, if you've read the articles, like, hey, I read this article that you published in, you know, and that obviously feels good to a faculty member. If you do that and you have some intelligent questions, that's really, really helpful. You know, you know, if you're coming in kind of to office hours, don't be, you know, I wouldn't be dismayed if your person's busy or hurried or whatever, because, you know, sometimes, and I say that probably is self-protected, because I think that people who talk to me feel that way, but it doesn't mean that you wouldn't have somebody who's really deeply invested in you as a mentee. and who's very willing to spend time with you once you develop that mentoring relationship. Is this helpful to you? Is this what you deserve? Okay.
Thank you.
You guys talk about bringing up new ideas to your mentor. What if they're not so accepting of anything outside of what they're used to doing?
So there's a couple caveats there. If one of my students tells me that their passion is in an area where I cannot provide equipment, supplies, or expertise, then my suggestion is, if that's what you want to do, I want you to do it, but it can't be with me, because I really can't help you pursue that goal. If that's not the issue, and it is somewhat aligned with the program, then the other thing, and this is where openness comes into conversation, is whether or not the project that you're working on is funded, has deadlines, your salary comes from it, which means if you're paid as an RA, your PI has to sign effort reports that is what you engaged in, and to continue to pay you, you need to produce. So it could be something as simple as, I want to pursue area X, I'd like to be on a teaching assistantship to do it, if it means we can explore it. I mean, and the other thing might be, remember, your PI has other experiences like sitting on review panels or reviewing papers, and what they may understand is that the level of competition in that area is not supportive of your success in it. So it might sometimes be worth an open conversation, remembering that in a sense, mentoring is like parenting. There are some things you don't tell your mentees. For example, if you know that working in this area means that so-and-so is going to exclude you out no matter what happens.
The politics.
That's the kind of stuff that we don't want you to be tarnished by. We want you to stay as open and eager as long as you can, until you're ready for how to navigate more complex things. So the reality is, you might just want to have a conversation about, I'm really interested in this area. I know we're not doing it, and I wonder if we could talk about what are the barriers to doing it, and what are the disadvantages to pursuing it. Might be a better strategy to finding that out. It could also be that it could be something that your advisor could put you on a path towards in a few years if you need expertise in side area X or Y. Does that make sense?
I've done things kind of similar. But like, someone's consistently do what he's already done. Even though it's not the standard anymore, it's more like a 10-year-old standard. And it's kind of frustrating because we have the equipment available to us for free. And so I don't understand why we shouldn't do it when it's the new standard of what's needed.
I really appreciate the question, and I think it's a very important topic. One of the things I advise students sometimes is that hopefully you're going to have a career-long work that you're going to do, and it may be best to utilize the professor or the mentor you have there with you and learn from them, learn about science or practice whatever it is, and then allows you to set you up to do that important work that you want to do later on. That it's for us in our field, I say you should make sure that your PhD, your dissertation, is meaningful, something you're passionate about, and doable. Make sure that you can do this project and finish it so that it doesn't hold you up, and that if there's this other really exciting work that you want to do, hopefully there's future opportunities for you. I'm not trying to discourage you from pushing it at all, but it sounds like maybe you've tried this a few times and so maybe it's you know, you look for future opportunities to do that sort of work.
And actually, there are lots of opportunities to apply for independent postdoctoral fellowships. If you have an idea independent of your advisor, that's not a bad thing to put in your pocket.
Yeah, I think usually all the funded projects, I mean, the advisor is going to have a final goal, right? They may not, some of them are going to be more explicit. They will send you the proposal and say, this is what I have to accomplish, task 1, 2, 3, 4. Others will not share the proposal with the students. They will just say, I want you to get this done. I think seeing that goal is an important question if you know what it is to your advisor. I mean, I think most of us will be okay if you have a different approach to get to the goal, right? Because the goal is what's keeping the lab funded, I mean, practically speaking, right? If you have all your PhD students there, and you cannot just deviate completely from that goal and accomplish something else because the deliverables are there for the project, right? So you have to know what is the project about, and then formulate your thesis around there, right? So you get to the goal the way you like, right? And hopefully your advisor will be open to other ideas, right? Not only what he or she will say, right? I would like you to do this micromanaging. Because as I said before, when you get towards the end, especially if you're doing the PhD, you have to be independent there. And you have to start teaching and start preparing yourself to be either a leader in the industry or an academic, right? A faculty in a top institution, right? If that's what you want to do. And so that's, I think that will be an important point there to see what is your advisor's goal. Right? If you do not know that, I think that's a good question there. What do you want to accomplish with this project? And what do you want and what your advisor wants to accomplish, right? Is that, are you talking about the same problem there, or you're talking about completely different, right, topics? So.
I actually don't know what his goal is because he changes what he wants out of everything.
Yeah, so I think will be an important question. I mean, of course, in a polite way, right? To find out what is the motivation for this study. You can put it that way, right?
I didn't ask it that way.
I mean, I think some of us are more open than others,
Yeah,
right? I talk to my students very openly. I have one student in the audience here, he can be the witness. But I talk to my students very openly. I share with them the proposals, and I tell them this is what I would like to get done, and you can choose your approach. But if we have deliverables, the NSF, DOE, EPA, we have to get this done, and for you, NIH or some other agencies there, I think you can try to find out, right? And like I said, think about doctoral lab mates, because some people probably have more experience than you do in terms of their relationship with your advisor, right? Depending on the stage of your grad school. And they will know better how to approach than I would, right? Than we would, because we don't know the dynamics in your lab there. So for some people it would be okay, for others, right, they'll be more of a boss, right? So I think that's
just another little thing. I suspect other training programs do this, but I would advise trying to have at least once a year or a couple of times a year, kind of more of a summary meeting where you're not just talking about the day-to-day things that you'd like, but let's sit down and let's talk about where we've been this past year in terms of your work as a student and where we want to go together. And so just so that you're not like, okay, we got to talk about these 6 things today and get it done. We have a separate meeting, sort of, okay, how's the year been for you? You know, that's what I would start with, and then, and so what are your goals for this next year? So have these kind of summary meetings, I guess I'm saying, in addition to the kind of week-to-week kind of things. And that, I don't know if that's talked about or not.
How many of you students, you sit through like evaluations per semester with your graduate advisor or your research advisor? Anybody has gone through that? Like a semester evaluation? No?
What about an annual, like a once-a-year one? Who does those?
It's required in our program.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Do other people do that? We do that in psychology.
Yeah.
We do that.
Yeah.
It's
We encourage faculty members to do that.
It's really helpful. Even if it's not part of your program, I would encourage, just say, hey, could I set up a meeting with you to kind of review where I am in the program and my progress as a professional, and just to talk about those general things as opposed to the specific.
And I might suggest a good start would be if you weren't required to report your progress, and your progress shouldn't be, I took this class and I took that. We're really talking about progress in your independent research. If you wrote up a summary, a 1 page, a half page of what did I accomplish this year, what thing happened, even if you don't hold semester or annual meetings, if you share that with your advisor and ask for permission to share it with your committee, then everybody's aware of what happened. I published this paper, or I almost published this paper, or this is my new focus. I mean, if they have issue with it, you want to have a meeting in year 2 or year 3, not in year 5. And yes, the expectation is the advisor knows when to schedule those meetings, but there's no rule that says you can't take the initiative to write a how did I do summary and say to your advisor, do you think this is an accurate reflection of how the year has gone? They might appreciate it.
Okay, because of time, we need to switch topic to your second role as a graduate student. Some of you may be assigned to work with undergraduate students under the same professor or in the same lab. Let's go ahead and share those tips, and then we'll open up for questions.
So in chemistry, my suggestion, and in most other areas, is if you don't have an experience being a mentor, you need to go do that for multiple reasons. At the very least, because when you go to apply for a job, which is very complicated now, you will be asked for evidence and examples where you demonstrated leadership and management. People want to know that not only are you the smartest person, but are you going to fit in the team? Are you going to take over the team? Can you help people? Can you lead people? Can you work with people? And the easiest way to do that is to say, I mentor an undergraduate every other semester. I mentor an undergraduate over the summer. A lot of times we view it as an activity that's an annoyance outside of research, but it's not at all. The truth about mentoring is that if you're a good mentor, you're asking yourself, what is my agenda for this person to learn? And how do I help them to learn it? And in doing that, what you're going to recognize are all the things that make you a bad mentee, right? Because that student is going to do things that are going to drive you nuts. You're going to have to repeat things 3 times, right? And then the light bulb will click about when you did that to your advisor. It's just like to teach is to learn. When the roles are reversed, you begin to learn the mechanics of how to do research because you're trying to explain to somebody less qualified than you how to do it. So it really sharpens your own research skills. And it helps you in the end when it's time for your vita. It helps you with your communication skills. It just helps with so much. Now, when is it not helpful? It's not helpful if you've published no papers, you don't have a dissertation, and you spend all your time interacting and engaging with students, right? Everybody's project usually has an offshoot of something that it doesn't seem worthy enough to pursue because it won't create an entire dissertation chapter, but it's an interesting and achievable academic question that merits an answer. Okay? You can always find something in your own research that if you had another pair of hands, you could pursue. Make sense? And so you want things to work in synergy. You don't want to stop your research to mentor, but you don't want to do your research and then mentor at the last minute. So you need to really think about how this can be done together and how you can integrate it successfully and grow. Does that make sense? That's my 10-minute thing. You have to mentor, and you can't just go through the motions. You have to reflect and be a better researcher because of it.
Yeah, I think I have some follow-up there, and I had a couple of points that were similar. On the burden, right? So some students, I mean, I talk in a group meeting and I say there's a new undergraduate student, right? And who has a project or something, who would like to mentor? And I always get the response from the same graduate students, right? So they have 2, 3, 4 people working with them. We have lots of undergraduates there in our lab. And the others hide, right? Some go under the table or disappear from the meeting. And I think that's a really good piece of advice there. So volunteer, especially if you want to go into a leadership position, right? And like I said, for the interview, that's very important. And just make sure, like Lisa was saying, it's not an easy task, right? And especially if you have never done it, but it is a great experience. The other one is also related to the point we were discussing there. In terms of the track, so the idea for the research. So sometimes the advisor is going to have an idea that is related to what you have, but sometimes the advisor is going to ask you, do you have anything that you can use, right, a track or some project for the undergraduate student? And my suggestion would be pick something that is not critical. Okay, so not something that you're waiting on. So a lot of the students will say, I need this simulation here, I need that experiment. And you give that to the undergraduate student to do it, and then you'll be waiting on that. And then what if the student does not get done? And that happens a lot of times, and then you're gonna be mad, you go and you redo the experiment or the simulation, and then you go and report that and you say the undergraduate has not done anything. That's what you report to the advisor. But is that task complex enough, right, for the level that the undergraduate can do in terms of research? So my suggestion would be find a track that is not as critical, something they would like to explore that is related to your research project, and then have the undergraduate working on that. I have lots of other items here. I can go through some of them as the time permits there. So I talked about this before on the first part here of our session in terms of expectations, in terms of tasks. So I think one of the very important things is define a clear list of expectations for the undergraduate student. So if you don't know what to do in your research as a graduate student, imagine the undergraduates, right? And define a clear list and something that is attainable, that they will see the end there, right? The project should not be very complex, and things that they can get done and you can assure, and you can ask your mentor, your advisor, right? Your advisor will help you out with that in terms of knowing, right? We advise students every day, so we'll know right away, no, this cannot be done. The students say, I'll get it done next month. I say, no, this is gonna take 2 years for you to do, right? So you kind of have an idea, even though, right, sometimes you don't believe. You say, no, I can do this very quickly, but the mentor will know. The other thing is related to what I said, to choose attainable goals. So you have a project, if undergraduate students will get a lot done over the summer, but you will not get a lot done during the semester. That's my experience. And don't expect that that's gonna be done, right? If the semester picks up, they have projects, exams, and all of that, they may not get anything done. And maybe in a break for the very hardworking ones, right? So set a more ambitious goal for the summer when they will have time if they're under a short program on RRU, and then set less ambitious goals during the semester of more of learning some tool, right? Not doing something very complex. The other thing I think we discussed a little bit before, the personal goals. I think we talked, Lisa talked a little bit before in the previous part of the workshop here. See what the goal of the students are also, right? What do they want to accomplish? Some of them will say, I just want to do anything, right? I just want to get experience in research. I don't care about the area. But others will have a vision. They will say, I would like to work with that energy or with that biological system or with that theory. And you can respect that because you're going to get more motivation from the student as well on that particular area. I get a lot of students in chemical engineering saying, I want to do something about coal. And I say, there's been coal because of the economics and all of that, everybody knows. Natural gas going up, but some of the students have passion about coal just because of their family, their grandfather or their father, or they say, we want to learn something and try to. So those students are passionate about that. They're going to succeed if I give them a project that is related to that usually works. The other thing, and in terms of the relationship, I think what I said before about applying to be honest and fair, this also applies to your undergraduate mentor. So try to build that constructive relationship, right, in terms of also telling them the clear goals, motivate them, and then when something doesn't go right, they should tell you. Some way that I said you should tell your advisor, right, and be open there and honest and fair. And finally, I think Lisa mentioned this as well, it is important for you to develop leadership skills, right? So I do have, in my group, we kind of do, and I'm sure for all the very busy, if you have lots of graduate students, we will do kind of have a hierarchical structure. right? I just to define the goals of everybody, and the executive decisions that get very busy, and then the graduate students will work with the undergraduate students, and they will define the little goals. If they need my help, I'll help out with defining the big picture goals. But I think for you, it's a good opportunity to actually make your own decisions and make executive decisions there, because there's not, especially if it's not a very critical task, right? You can make your decisions and move on. Your advisor is going to be very happy if something meaningful comes out of the undergraduate project. If you got a poster, a short presentation, a national meeting presentation, a national meeting award, we have several cases here. Students go to national conferences and get a poster award or a presentation award. They are more worried about that, the success of the project, right? Like I said, it's typically not going to be a PhD, right, track or a very critical, it's a small section of a project there. So I think that's your opportunity to make your own decisions there and move on, right? So that's what I have.
So I'm going to be a psychologist for just a couple of minutes here. We're talking about mentoring undergraduates, and I just invite all of us to think about that we're kind of a unique group here in graduate students and faculty, and even we're very unique because it's 4:30 on the afternoon and we're all sitting here thinking about how to do our jobs even better. We are a unique group, and this is really a positive for all of us. Not every undergraduate is as dedicated as you are as a graduate student. They're wonderful people, but they don't have the same level of dedication or passion, or they have other life interests. And I think that should be respected. Yeah, I love to work with those undergrads who want to go to grad school and like the world environment. They're great fun. But there are also very important undergraduates who want to have a different kind of work-life balance, and they also need to be respected. And so I think if we make our expectations reasonable about what they are looking for, I think that will be very helpful in our working with them positively. The other thing I would say is to try to enrich the relationships, particularly with undergrads. Many times they're learning about life, they're uncertain, they're hesitant or shy or don't know the field. Let's enrich the relationship. In psychology, we have this phrase, labeled praises. Telling people specifically what they're doing and doing well. And I think with undergrads, sometimes we have to really focus on some mechanics. Gosh, you're right on time. Thanks for being here today. It's a labeled praise. You're coming on time, and I'm saying to you, coming on time for mentoring meetings is important, and I'm trying to reinforce that. Many times, in the old days, I would really encourage people, bring a notebook and a pen to a meeting. I said, do you need some paper? Or if they bring the notebook, that's good. Now, a lot of times people do that on their phone now. Hey, you're taking notes on your phone. That's great to see. Thanks for being so organized. Goes back to my organization thing. It's labeled praises, telling them what they're doing well in the mentoring, advising relationship so they know what to do. Calendars, too. Most people keep them on their phone now. Glad to see you're putting our next meeting in your calendar. And just those mechanics, I think, with undergraduates do help because they're learning how to work in this world. And some of them don't yet have those skills. We really need to, I think, to reward those. But I do also really appreciate what you've said about being open and providing constructive feedback when necessary, and hopefully there's a positive relationship. But if there's things that a mentee is doing, if they're coming late to meetings, if they're not doing their job in the lab, I do think we also need to kindly but very directly state that to them so that they know what the expectations are. The other thing I'd say, I've talked about boundaries before, and I don't want to overemphasize that, but it's important here as well in terms of relationships. Undergraduates are closer in age and interest to each of you than they are certainly to me. And so we really need to be, I think, vigilant about those relationships and make sure that they maintain professional boundaries and that they understand the limits of those relationships, that they're professional ones, they're not friendships, they're not other kinds of relationships, and we need to be cautious about that for ourselves and also for the people that we supervise. None of that is to cast a negative light on it. I think I would also say about these relationships, try to enjoy working with undergraduates. Make it fun for yourself and interesting, and to make it a positive part as opposed to, say, a burden or something you gotta do or you're being forced to do. And I guess just finally, share the success with them too. Like in my lab, the graduate students are responsible for seeing the undergraduates are doing certain things. When your undergraduates that you're supervising are performing well, make sure you bring that out and praise them publicly, and making sure that your professor knows that. Share the success so that they know what they're doing well.
Questions? I'm sure you have questions. Or share a story. Oh, there's one.
One of the biggest problems is letting the undergrads, well, not letting, having them work on their own after I've shown them something, and having them not asking a million questions over and over. Especially when they try to do it one time by themselves and they fail, and they get really nervous and don't want to do it again ever by themselves. It becomes extremely time consuming for myself, and I want them to grow on their own rather than me watch them all the time.
So I can offer advice in this area. One thing is that when you're teaching someone a technique, it's important that it's not passive and that it's active. So the first thing is to make sure for that technique you have written a standard operating procedure. What are the instructions for doing it? And you need them to have that before they come to lab and you show them. When they've read it, then they need to be by your side while you're showing them so they can read the instructions or see where there were problems. And then you really do need to take a day where you're close, but you only intervene when it's critical, and you force them to make mistakes and understand where they didn't pay attention. If you go through that process one time or two times with different techniques, what happens is they begin to learn how to pay attention more actively and to follow instructions. So doing it over and over and over again won't solve the problem, it will perpetuate the problem, but sort of implementing the tools and the structure to do it will help. And that will be a problem you will face when you graduate, is how to communicate at your next work site, how to do something. And most companies and labs do the same thing.
Sometimes have to decide where to cut them off and helping them.
So what always works for me, and maybe different in your field, is it's like teaching a class. I give them the document ahead of time so they have on their own an opportunity to digest what's happening. Then by my side or by the grad student side, you go through the procedure together. So you're doing it while you're showing them the steps that align with the instructions in the protocol. So they have guided instruction. Then the third thing to do is to let them do it and be close enough so that if they need, how do I do step 4, you're an earshot away, but to be far enough so they actually have to do it with you saying, no, you put it in this one to make it work, right? You have to let them have an opportunity to fail or to find where the problems are, and then to come to you and ask where they are with instructions in hand. But you have to be close enough so that equipment isn't damaged or toxic chemicals aren't mixed. So you hover invisibly, right?
I have a simplistic example that may help with this. You know, when you're teaching or learning a new computer skill, you know, some software. And you know, I get this from some of my mentees. How do you do this? And you know, what they want to do is show you, and they do it really quickly.
Yeah.
And then they leave, and you try to do it, and you fail. The hardest thing in the world to do, I think, is to show them and then literally get up, let them be in the driver's seat with the computer, and you sit there with your hands here and imagining duct tape on your mouth, and you let them do it. You know, you let them where you're close by. But you know, you see that all the time in learning these, you know, little simple computer things. If people, you know, they're impatient, they know how to do it so well that you kind of rush through it. But I just love what you say, you know, be close enough. You know, sometimes what I'll do is show people things and just, you know, put the duct tape on my mouth symbolically, watch them, and then I'll say, great, you did that well. I'm going to go to the next room. I'll check in with you in a few minutes. And then I'll come back and see how they do, but you're just kind of gradually moving away from the closeness of supervision.
And so that skill takes time to develop, but when you are brought in as a team member, that's what your employer or your university or your supervisor is going to want to know is, do you know how to do that? So it's a great skill, and I think there is always going to be a case where somebody's not cut out for what you're doing, and you can explain it 1,000 times and it doesn't matter. But if it happens every single time, then the other variable might be how you're approaching the communication. And what you really want is to go into a job interview and explain what's your method to teach a complicated protocol, or your method to train someone. And that's what these experiences are offering you, is insight in what didn't work and what you want to try next. Does that make sense?
I do a lot of what you're talking about, but maybe just take time.
How many of you are currently working with undergraduate researchers? Okay. Yeah, question?
Yeah, so I've had the pleasure of working with multiple undergraduate students, and some of them for multiple terms. So I ended up with 5 during one semester, actually. And so I had 2 that came in that had equal, you know, I always try to talk with them and ask where they want to go, if they really want to go into graduate school and they want to kind of develop those kinds of skills that will make them successful, or if they want to head into industry and have kind of marketable skills like instrument maintenance and things like that in chemistry. And I had 2 that were both wanted to head into industry, and so I set them up on the same project where they were working together. And one was very motivated and always accomplished a lot, and by the time he left, he, you know, had all these skills where I could set him loose onto an instrument and he could perform everything under the sun. And then one that was very lackadaisical about their research experience. So is there a way to kind of encourage the ones that maybe aren't self-motivated to learn those skills, so that, you know, they both come out learning something more other than just how to deal with software? Does that make sense?
Yes, but it's unique for every one of them. You'll find the solution for that second person. 5 years later, you'll get a third one that strikes similarities, and what you did the first time won't work. It's like mentoring on the fly. You're inputting all this information about them and sort of formulating best strategies. So, I mean.
Yeah, no.
I guess the other thing I think about is that, you know, I've been really impressed with undergraduates here at WVU, and I ask in my classes, like, how many of you are working a job outside of being a full-time student? Most of them raise their hands. How many of you is working 2 jobs? And still a chunk of them do. So I do think in this mentoring relationship, it is helpful to have some information about the person if they are willing to share it. And I think a lot of times people have sick parents, sick relatives, financial difficulties, car difficulties that they are embarrassed to share, to talk about. And again, you know, I respect privacy, but if a student wants to share that, and I know that's a part of it, I guess I've just been impressed the number of times where I've seen pretty poor for performance, how there have been other factors involved with it. Adjusting to a new culture or a new country, you know, that's, you know, harder than I can probably imagine. So, I don't know, that's the only thing I'd say is that there may be some other sorts of things, and so maybe, you know, in that relationship, it's, you know, maybe a more, how are things going for you? You know, just if they're willing to talk about it, and, you know, maybe there's some other things there that, you know, need to be thought about is my only other thought with that one.
5 is a lot. I mean, 5 a semester is a lot.
Yeah, I was running my own mini research program.
Yeah,
It's a good
but
experience.
yeah, great experience for you as a new upcoming faculty member, right?
Yeah.
He's like, you got it.
Yeah, I think one of the questions also is that student enjoying the work, you know, related to what we were saying before about the uniqueness of each student. I mean, they were working together. Was that person enjoying just to work together with the other student, or actually enjoying that type of work? Because then once the other student left, the motivation kind of went down, or maybe it's always been down. It's just that the other student gets all the work done, and then again goes back to the point of what are they interested in? And I always found out. I mean, we mentored some students who are not very good academically, right? So walked in my office and said, I would love to do research with you. And I said, okay, let's give it a try. And they excelled. I mean, they got national awards. They went up, you know, to do a lot of stuff just because we actually found where their passion is, right? And I think it's very difficult if the students are actually they're not interested in that particular topic, or that's not necessarily like the area they love there. And then there wouldn't be no way to motivate. I think that's a very tough one there, right? It would be very, very, very difficult. You cannot just say, right, there's not much of a grade or other things like that. Even if there was, right, some of the students don't even give that much of importance for that. So I think that could be the question, right? What is that student interested in? Like, does this project motivate you, make you come here to the lab and, you know, love to do that and wake up in the morning and wanted to actually do research, or you're just there because, right, you're just working with the other lab mates before? Not sure. I mean, I think that would be a good question.
And if it turns out that student isn't enjoying it, that's a very valuable piece of information for you to help them realize, because that might save them seeking a job that they aren't gonna enjoy at all.
I recruited, a couple of years ago, I recruited this really outstanding undergraduate. She had applied to be an officer in our student organization. I was thrilled to have her. She was organized, things like that. And we had the conversation at the towards the end of the semester. I said, you know, really want to encourage people to start thinking about what you're going to do next semester, and you know, if this is interesting you. And I was really hoping she would continue on. And she took. I said, but if you want to work with another faculty member, please, you know, consider doing that. And I was both thrilled and very disappointed that she contacted another faculty member in our department and decided to work in clinical child psychology instead of me. It's equally difficult because that was my wife that she was starting to work with. But, you know, that was part of it, you know, is that you know, she wasn't going to be as passionate about the pain and anxiety work with me, but boy, clinical child psychology, that's what she wanted to do. So, you know, maybe that's an answer too.
I guess along the same vein, my question is, as a mentor, how many hats do you wear? So for sure, we know that we're instructors, we're teachers, we teach technical skills. How much of our responsibility is, for example, making sure the student is mentally in the correct place to come to work and to the lab every day?
None. The university hires highly qualified people at Caruth, and if you don't, if that's not your job, then your job is to steer them towards those resources that WVU has invested in heavily. So it sounds harsh, but if somebody is mentally having issues, there are way better resources that you should just refer them to. And definitely have a talk with your supervisor about what's going on so that everybody's in the loop. Is that what you meant or something?
Well, no.
different?
So that's an example. Going back to the main question is how many hats do we wear? So I mean, for sure, we take up the responsibility of teaching and instructing and technical skills and things like that. What other responsibilities? And I guess this might be a really field-specific question for different mentors and different fields. It could be different. I was wondering if you had any general advice.
I think there may be some differences here. Let me just throw out mine, because I might be a little bit different. And what I tell my students is that I want them to be happy and successful. And I hope that's in psychology, because that's what we're doing right now, but I realize you might change your mind. And so I try not to be too, I really am kind of into mentoring the whole person and what they will, what they want to achieve as in happiness in life. And for some of them, I had a student once who left psychology and went into acting. And I was thrilled with that, because that was more of her passion. That's what she found out she wanted to do. So that made, I don't know if that just does, there's so many hats, maybe too many to count, I think, that we would wear.
But you're only one person, right? So here's the thing: when you write that letter, what is it you want to say that you can now do as a result of the experience you had in mentoring? I mean, and I think there's a limit. Just, we talked about boundaries. Whatever are the things you would put in a professional letter, those are the things you want to be there with for hats, right? But there's definitely a line of things that you wouldn't put in a letter that you did, right? Does that?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about, actually, Lisa, I think you mentioned it. The mentoring experience should be in our professional resume or CV.
Yeah.
What would you call it? You know how we have research experience, presentation, publication. What would you call a mentoring experience?
For sure, supervision and management.
Okay.
And I would
That's
probably, if you led a team of 5, I would put it leadership.
Leadership.
And other leadership would be definitely if you were in charge of a professional society or something. But definite supervision, and if your undergrad did a poster and you co-authored it with them, but their first author, that's fabulous. It shows what you've done. So and I can't emphasize it enough that they're looking for it now on your Vita.
And a lot of people don't list it, believe it or not. I mean, even when we got faculty applications, I mean, we're in committees and we review hundreds of applications for faculty positions. And believe me, they don't list. Like, you're looking for, and they have like the application is really long, but we go straight to the CV because there's just so many people. And then it just lists the papers published, grant. Some of them don't even list grants that I've been involved with, paper presentations, and you don't find, you have to dig into that, but you really don't want the committee to dig into, the hiring committee, right, to look for information. You want to explicitly tell them, because that's your opportunity there, right, everything you have done, the highlights, and that's definitely one of them.
Sure. So you, most important to least, you tailor it to the experience, right? But you might want to explain supervision experience, mentored 16 undergrads during my tenure, resulting in 5 papers and 6 poster presentations, C publications and presentations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very good. Any other question?
I'll ask
Yes,
another.
sure.
So, like, let's say mentors to the graduate students, right? As the longer they get in the program, the further that they get, your expectations of them change about what they can produce. So, you know, do you, as a graduate student, do you get to do that too, as you kind of teach them things and shift that expectation? And how do you know it's maybe too much for them, I guess, is, you know, is that just like discussion, or?
I think it's great that you're thinking about this, and I very much agree with the model of it's shaping them, really. I think it would be just fine to have a very explicit conversation about this, particularly towards the end of the first semester, is kind of outline what they've done and then how things would change and what the expectations might be in the second semester. I think that's a great idea, and I would just try to make it also pretty explicit. Also finding out about what their goals are for, after the first semester, where they want to be at the end of the second semester.
Yeah, and I think to find out, like I mentioned something related before, to find out if that's too much. I mean, if you're really questioning, I would talk to your supervisor, to your PhD advisor, because they will know. Right? They will have an idea. Like I mentioned before, we have mentored the dozens, or sometimes a lot more than that, students, and if you say, I'm planning to give this type of work for a semester or for a year, we're gonna have a very good idea of what it is. And then if you're really questioning, right? If you feel comfortable to move on, you can try to find out, you can talk to the student. But yeah, if you're really questioning, I would suggest that you do that and ask some, especially your advisor. You can ask other people too, other group members, but especially your advisor, and they will know how to guide you.
Thank you. Let's give our professors a great hand for being here. Besides the thank you, I want to make a quick announcement, as you should have received some information about our November 9th Career Development Symposium for Graduate Students. It's an all-day event. Yes, it's going to cost you a little bit of money. Okay, we're charging you $15 because we're providing breakfast, all-day refreshment, and a luncheon. The lunch, especially, we're going to talk about etiquette, right? You're all going to become professional. And so how do we behave, okay, in a professional environment? This information will be helpful to you during interviews, because nowadays they do it on purpose, right? They take you to lunch or dinner, just kind of want to observe you and to see if you know how to behave professionally. So I would encourage you to consider attending that, and there's a registration link. You will